Have you ever been rejected, not because of your actions or words, but simply because of who you are? Can you imagine walking into a place where you should feel welcome, only to be met with disdain? It's not because you did anything wrong, but simply because of your skin color? In that moment, you feel powerless, lost, and rejected. But what if that moment of hurt, of rejection, could spark a chain of events that would change not only your life, but also the lives of those around you? This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, a man who, when faced with blatant rejection, chose not to succumb to anger or despair. Instead, he chose kindness and resilience. And in doing so, he didn't just challenge one person's prejudice, he reshaped an entire institution. It was a cool morning in Paris when Ibrahim found himself at the doorstep of one of the city's most prestigious hotels. Paris often referred to as the City of Light was known for its elegance, charm, and class. The hotel was an architectural marvel, with its marble floors, grand chandeliers, and sophisticated ambiance. It was the kind of place where people came to escape their worries and indulge in luxury. Ibrahim was no different. After a long, grueling diplomatic meeting, he had chosen this hotel to rest, to find solace away from the pressures that weighed heavily on his shoulders. As he entered, Ibrahim was greeted by the tall, polished glass doors that led into the lobby. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air, mingling with the faint smell of expensive perfume. The lobby was a picture of serenity marble. Floors gleamed and guests spoke in hushed tones, moving gracefully through the space. It was an oasis of calm, a sharp contrast to the chaotic day he had endured. Ibrahim walked confidently toward the front desk, where a young waitress stood behind the counter, tapping away on her phone. She was about to meet someone who, in a few short hours, would change the course of her life. Ibrahim approached her with a smile, his voice warm as he greeted her in French. "Good afternoon. I have a reservation under the name Ibrahim Traoré." He was accustomed to being treated with respect, especially in such a high-end establishment. Little did he know, the reception he was about to receive would challenge everything he thought he knew about humanity. The waitress barely looked up from her phone. When she did, her eyes scanned him briefly before she said in a tone that was cold and dismissive, "I'm sorry, we don't have any rooms available." Ibrahim blinked, confused. "I have a reservation," he said, pulling out his phone to show her the booking confirmation. She stared at him for a long moment, her gaze hardening. "There's nothing available," she repeated, her voice flat and emotionless. "You should try another hotel." Ibrahim felt a twinge of discomfort. Something about the situation felt wrong. "But I've already confirmed," he said, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm sure you can check again." Instead of responding, the waitress turned back to her phone, as if he no longer mattered. Ibrahim stood there for a moment, stunned. The silence between them grew heavy, and Ibrahim felt a sinking feeling in his chest. He wasn't just being rejected for a lack of rooms. It was something deeper, something that made him feel unwanted in this place, a place he had chosen. Because of its reputation for luxury and hospitality, his heart began to race. He knew what this was. He had seen it before. It was a form of discrimination, pure and simple. A moment of shame washed over him. Was it because of his appearance? Was it because of his skin? The realization hit hard, and for a moment, Ibrahim almost left the hotel, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to walk away, his head held high. He would not let this moment define him. As he walked out of the hotel and into the cool Parisian evening, Ibrahim's thoughts swirled. What if he could turn this situation around? What if he could make a real difference? That night, as Ibrahim sat in his hotel room at a different location, a new thought began to take shape. This wasn't just about him. This was bigger. If he let this incident slide, it would be just another example of how easy it was for people to treat others as inferior based on nothing but prejudice. He knew he could do more, he could challenge this injustice, but he would need to do something bold. The next morning, Ibrahim made up his mind. He was going back to the hotel not as a guest, but with a purpose. He was going to confront the situation head-on and show them that kindness, integrity, and respect were more powerful than hate or prejudice. He walked into the hotel that morning with a quiet resolve. The air felt different, charged with anticipation. The young waitress was again behind the desk, looking just as disinterested as the day before. She didn't recognize him at first, but when she saw him approach, her eyes widened slightly. She seemed to remember him, but quickly turned back to her work. "Good morning," Ibrahim said calmly. "I'm Ibrahim Traoré, and I'd like to speak with the manager." The receptionist hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure how to respond. Then, after a brief pause, she reluctantly stood up and went to the back of the hotel. Ibrahim remained at the desk, his stance firm but patient. He knew that the real work was about to begin. Moments later, the manager, a sharply dressed man with a stern but respectful demeanor, approached him. "Mr. Traoré," he said with a polite nod, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. How may I help you today?" Ibrahim took the manager's hand firmly, but his voice was steady. "Yes. I was here yesterday and I was treated poorly by your receptionist. I believe it was due to my appearance and I wanted to speak with you about it." The manager's eyes narrowed slightly, and he gestured for Ibrahim to follow him into his office. Once they were seated, the conversation took a serious turn. Ibrahim looked the manager in the eye, unflinching. "I was rejected by your staff yesterday," Ibrahim said quietly but firmly. "Not because there were no rooms available, but because of the way I look. I want you to understand why that is unacceptable, not just for me, but for anyone who walks through these doors." The manager, though surprised, was not defensive. Instead, he listened intently as Ibrahim spoke about his experience, about the harm that discrimination, whether subtle or overt, could cause, and how it was crucial for businesses, especially in a place like Paris, to be inclusive and welcoming to all. After a long pause, the manager nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Traoré. I am deeply sorry for the experience you had here. This will not be tolerated." Ibrahim, seeing the sincerity in the manager's response, nodded. "I want to help," he said. "I want to work with you to ensure that this never happens again. I want to help train your staff so they understand what inclusivity means and why it's so important." The manager hesitated for a moment, but then his face softened. "I think that's a great idea," he said. "You would be honored to have your help." From that moment on, Ibrahim worked closely with the hotel staff, leading workshops and training sessions on diversity, inclusion, and the importance of empathy. It wasn't just about teaching them to be polite. It was about teaching them to be kind, to see each guest as a person, not a stereotype. Slowly, the atmosphere of the hotel began to shift. The once cold and indifferent staff became more attentive and caring. The receptionist who had rejected Ibrahim now greeted guests with a smile, her previously held prejudices slowly dissolving under Ibrahim's influence. Weeks turned into months, and the change in the hotel was undeniable. Ibrahim's efforts had made a lasting impact, not just on the staff, but on the entire hotel culture. The hotel, which had once been a place where guests felt the sting of subtle bias, had become a sanctuary of respect, understanding, and warmth. One evening, Ibrahim received a call from the hotel manager, inviting him to the annual gala. When he arrived, he was greeted not just as a guest, but as a hero, someone who had transformed not only the hotel, but also the hearts and minds of everyone there. The manager, standing before a room full of dignitaries and guests, raised his glass in Ibrahim's honor. "We couldn't have done this without you, Mr. Traoré," the manager said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You've taught us a lesson in humanity that we will carry with us forever." Ibrahim smiled. "I didn't do it for recognition," he said humbly. "I did it because I believe that kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change the world." As the night came to a close, Ibrahim stood by the balcony, looking out at the city. He thought about the day he had been rejected, how it had hurt him, and how he had used that pain to fuel something greater.